Ever wonder what really goes on in the world of offshore oil rigs, wind farms, and the energy industry that powers your life? Find the answers to those questions and more on the podcast Wind, Waves, and Wells with Joe. Wind, Waves, and Wells with Joe pulls back the curtain and shares the raw, unfiltered stories from the front lines of energy. From offshore drilling disasters to wind turbine advancements, Joe brings on people who've lived it, worked it, and have the scars or the laughs to prove it. When you tune into Wind, Waves, and Wells with Joe, you'll hear jaw-dropping experiences like being 100 meters underwater with no air, to real conversations about safety, environmental impact, and the politics that don't make it into the brochures. It's insight, storytelling, and sometimes controversy, and always honest. If you're an energy insider or just someone curious about the wild world that keeps the lights on, Wind, Waves, and Wells with Joe is the podcast for you. Available on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and wherever you listen to podcasts. Real people, real stories, no filter. Wind, Waves, and Wells with Joe. Start listening right now.
John, just before we go into this one, obviously, you know, you've never really spoken much about this since obviously the investigations and stuff like that. So one thing I will say is thank you for approaching me after coming across this on LinkedIn, because I think it's really important to hear, you know, as we've discussed plenty of times before, you know, the scenario from which we never heard, which was BP's side of things, because everything was basically demonizing BP. So I do appreciate you a lot for coming on. I will say that.
All right. Well, I appreciate. That's why I reached out to you after I saw the listing, and that's why that's why I did, because it's been a long time, and there's things that can be said. So
yeah. So before we get into Deepwater Horizon, do you want to tell us a bit about, you know, where you started, where you came from, and that?
Yeah, I'll just do a really short synopsis here. Started in 1980. Yeah. First job was on the shallow water production platform in the Gulf of Mexico. Got into deepwater drilling in 1983. I did that until 1988. Then I worked in the Middle East for several years, working in the Persian Gulf. But then back to the United States land in Appalachia, Pennsylvania, Kentucky, West Virginia, Virginia, New York. And then in 1997, came back into the Gulf of Mexico, did shallow water for 3 years. And then in 2000, got back into deep water and worked in deep water from 2000 to 2010. Then did a couple of years in Angola, which was lovely, by the way. Loved West Africa. Then after that, came back because I was involved in a civil trial, and then spent the last 7 years of my career with BP onshore. And I retired at the end of 2020.
BP onshore, what was your role when you were there?
I had different roles. I was the performance manager. I was the senior drilling engineer / drilling superintendent for several rigs in a play called the Haynesville, which was very, very challenging and very difficult. Some of the hardest wells ever drilled. But in there, I from 2007 to 2010, I was assigned to Deepwater Horizon.
So obviously, you know, this kind of ties us into what majority of this conversation is going to be about. Deepwater Horizon, you know, you reached out, you heard Leo's side. Leo's version, obviously, as we've spoken about, and we're not going to, you know, put anything down on anything here, but obviously there was a lot of what was portrayed, not just by Leo, but by other media outlets. There was a lot of bother going up to the day of Deepwater Horizon, but what was the kind of lay of the land, so to speak, of Deepwater Horizon prior to the blowout?
Well, Deepwater Horizon was BP's best operating rig in the world, I believe. And let me clarify a couple of things so people know. Whatever I say is nothing, and is not BP. This is not BP. We put a disclaimer out there, and I need to do this because it's important to me. But what I say is John Guide is not BP. But prior to that, the Horizon started with Vatstar, which is where I came from, and it worked 10 years with BP. They were the deepwater drilling rig exploration. They did go off and do other little projects, but their main reason was, their main remit was to drill the exploration wells for deep water. Gulf of Mexico drilling for BP. I was very lucky to be assigned to that. I thought it was actually they were giving me a compliment to letting me go work for these people, because they were, like I said, you can read this in the transcripts in the trial. I mean, I thought these people were the best in the business, and I still believe that to this day.
So, Macondo, I mind, we've spoken about this before. That well wasn't supposed to be drilled by Horizon, though, was it?
No. So what happened was there was a hurricane came through, and then Marianas was drilling the well at the time. Marianas was a moored rig, and the hurricane came through, and it gave severe damage to the rig, like $30 million. Why do I remember that number? I'll tell you here in a second, because it's actually important. So the rig was seriously damaged, so it couldn't continue drilling the well. BP paid to fix the rig. So it wasn't, Transocean didn't pay. They might have paid something, a small amount, but BP paid to have Marianas fixed and repaired back to. So, but it wasn't able to go do this in the schedule that BP wanted to. So we adjusted our schedule, which happened on a regular basis. And we went over and finished the Macondo well that was already drilled down to a certain point. It wasn't for the hurricane, we would have never even been there, because that wasn't even on our schedule. But that's the way deepwater drilling is. You only have so many vessels to go work on rigs, and they tell you, work on wells, and then they say this is where you're going to go, and that's where we went.
Was Macondo, I take it, well, Macondo was over budget, and was it over, well out of time, so not out of time, but over time and over budget, was it? By the, at the period. Yeah.
They said that, but it wasn't. It was over budget and over time based on the fact that the Marianas was going to drill it. And so there was a time frame in there. And then BP had to pay, BP paid $30 or some more $1 million to get their rig fixed. What did nothing to do with the well? So when we showed up, the well was already way behind schedule and over budget. The well was. Not us, though. I'm the person that kept track of along with the engineers, of the time, the schedule, and how much money we were spending. And actually, we weren't over budget and we weren't behind schedule. But that never ever came up. I'm not talking about what happened before we got there. I'm talking about what happened when we were there. We weren't behind schedule.
Was it? I take it the challenges though prior to it was everything going as, so to speak, planned
on Macondo?
Yeah,
with the Marianas. Well, they had only got to the section where they didn't even land the BOP stack yet.
Right.
Or maybe one whole section. So we got there. It was just in its fledgling state. It only had a couple casings for the set. So we just went there and continued the well. But that part of the Gulf of Mexico, and anything, if people that watch this have to remember, everything I'm going to say is back in 2010. This isn't 2025. So the regulatory people I talk about, the way the wells are drilled, I don't know what's happened since then. But that part of the Gulf of Mexico, which was Mississippi Canyon, no salt, was a very challenging place to drill wells from the pore pressure fracture gradient standpoint, which is one of the reasons why I decided to actually come on your podcast, because I'm seeing the people that view it. These are the people that actually worked in the business. And so they'll understand this tight window of drilling a well. It makes it very difficult. And it was a challenging well.
Guys, I'm sorry to interrupt this show, and I really hope you're enjoying it. One thing I'm going to ask you, if you're listening to it and you're not liking, following, or subscribing to it, could I ask a massive favor that you do? It really helps the show, it helps me bring in more people, and it helps me get more stories out there, which in favor brings more stories back in. Let's get back to it. Was it really the well from hell?
No.
No,
shit. I'm sorry. Am I allowed to say that word?
So yeah, you can swear, it's fine.
Okay. Yeah. No. So the first time I heard the saying "well from hell" was 1980. 1980.
Okay.
Yeah, the first year I started. It rhymes. It rhymes. Come on. Yeah. It's the oil field. You got a bunch of goofballs in the oil field. They love to make up sayings. You have to. I can't even. I could go into a litany of all the sayings that was not the well from hell. I drilled. This is actually a really interesting point about it. So I made a statement in a meeting one day with the legal people, and I said, "This was by far not the hardest well I ever drilled in my life," and they were flabbergasted. They just couldn't believe it. There's a key point here: drilled. Okay. And that's why I'm really hoping that the people that listen to this are the people who actually drill wells in the Deepwater arena. We drilled the well. Were there problems? Yeah. There were the normal problems you have in exploration. But we drilled the well with TV, and we logged the well for days, because that's what you do in exploration. We're there to get data. We then turned around and ran casing and cemented the casing and tested the casing. So drilling the well was actually a success. It was a subsequent operation. It wasn't a success. It was not drilling a well. It was by far not the hardest well I ever was involved with drilling in my life.
How did that day go for you? Because obviously you were on the beach at the time, as we've spoken about on via message and whatnot. But how did that day go for you?
Well, the day we ran the casing, all that was actually good. There was some complications, which I'll tell about. So we ran the casing. We get to watch it. I'm sure the what they see now is way more than what we saw back then. But I watched them run the casing screen, and it went straight to bottom. It went straight into the well. So I know Leo said there was a crunching thing or something happened. I'm not quite sure what he meant by that, because that didn't happen. But when we did land the casing screen in the wellhead, when you drill a well like this, one of the things that BP, and I think most of people probably still use today, I don't know this, we did everything we could not to put a surge on the well, so we would keep the fluid column in the well. So we had what was called autofill flow equipment, and we had a diverter up in the riser. But with a diverter, helps divert flow that comes up the drill pipe and goes out into the riser. It reduces the pressure effect of you running the casing into the well. The casing went straight into the hole. And I mean, I was very, very happy. But then we went to convert the float equipment. It was supposed to convert at a certain pressure, and it didn't. We had our engineer on the rig, the BP engineer. We had two engineers for a while. We had a lead engineer and an other engineer. This was the other engineer, very, very smart young man. We went to convert the float equipment, and it didn't convert at the right pressure. So he got on the phone and called the equipment manufacturer, and we talked about what we could do to convert the float equipment. And then we did. We went by their instructions, and we went up sequences because this all came out in the trial, which was completely skewed. When they say you can go to a certain pressure, well, you just don't go to that pressure. You ramp it up into little steps. And we did in the converting. And so what that means is the flow wouldn't go up the pipe no more. It would go down the pipe because there's valves in there. But when we did establish full circulation, the pressures were way lower than the model said it was going to be. And to this day, I can't tell you why it was. I know a person on LinkedIn, a nice gentleman that wrote a PhD thesis or something about it. He commented about maybe it was gas coming in. Well, it might have been. I don't know. I still can't tell you because I don't know. But we went ahead and did the job. We pumped the cement. Oh, let me back up. There's a very important point. Don, one of the drill foremen on the rig, he called me and said the pressures are a lot lower than what we anticipated. Let's make sure we don't have a leak. So we did. We had this diverter tore up the hole. It had a hole in it. It was in a riser. And when you drop a ball, it closes. Well, all that looked good. So we went through the sequence of making sure that piece of equipment was closed, and it was. So we pumped the job, and it went fine. And we pumped the whole volume. We had complete returns. As we get into the technical, we bumped the plug on strokes, which means we pumped X amount of barrels. It was supposed to land at those barrels. It did. We had full returns the whole way. Then we set the pack. We tested the casing, set the pack off, everything tested. So now I'm, as the superintendent, I'm actually feeling pretty good. Then I went home and I went to bed.
When was the negative? See the negative test that obviously, probably most people who know about Deepwater Horizon would have come across. When was that? Were you in? Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, were you about when the negative test was done?
Yeah, I was still awake at the time, but we had a protocol. I mean, on the rig. And that was, here's our plan. We're going to do this, and this. And I was not a micromanager. So if the plan is going according to plan, then don't call me. If there's an issue, call me. So they performed the negative tests, and obviously it didn't pass, and we could talk about that later. I'm not exonerating myself or anything like that.
No.
No one called me, but I didn't ask them to call me because I was like, if everything's going okay, then don't call me. So they didn't. But it obviously didn't pass.
Why do you think that? Why do you think they carried on knowing that, though?
I don't know. There's two things to this day that no one's ever explained to me. The mountain that they explained to anybody. That's a big deal. So Halliburton pumped a cement job. And Halliburton, in my opinion, is the premier cementing company in the world. I have the utmost respect for that, and I still do. And I worked for them all the way up until I retired. We pumped a cement slurry that didn't set up. I don't know why it didn't set up, but it didn't. Halliburton didn't pump a slurry they didn't want to set up. They wanted it to set up, but it didn't. I can't tell you why it didn't. And the other thing that happened was we did a negative test before we pulled the riser. And it happens every day in deepwater drilling. And all the people involved with that believed it was okay. And they continued, but it wasn't. I still don't know the reason why to this day. No one's ever told me.
So you led the investigation. You led part of the investigation, didn't you? After Macondo.
No, I led no investigations.
No, you were part of the investigation. Sorry, is what I meant to say. Sorry, yes. You were part of the investigation. What was the outcome of the negative test for you? Like what they found out. Sorry.
Well, the negative test was failed. We did a simple YouTube test of water. It's YouTube testing has been around for a long time. I don't know how long it's been around. But at the end, if you have the same weight fluid on one side or the other, would you bleed the pressure off? It should basically be zero. And it wasn't. It was over 1,000 PSI on one side, zero on the other. So I can't tell you. But I can say there were a lot of smart people involved in that decision, and they believed it was okay. So I don't know what happened.
So the actual incident, why Deepwater Horizon had the disaster in the end, then from your findings and from what you know, and what is the step-by-step issues that went down that night?
Well, I don't know. I wasn't there, so I can't give you the step-by-step issues,
Yeah.
But it was I can give you my personal opinion, which is not in any investigation like that everybody involved in our operation should have done better. Everybody. Me, everybody. Everyone involved in the operation should have done better. There's this is, I'm probably getting me in trouble here, but, I was actually the superintendent of Europe. The Deepwater Horizon was a ongoing operation that BP had since 2000, coming from Vastar, that they had a bunch of people before me, and all these guys did great jobs. And it was plug and play because they had this machine going that was the best performing well in the fleet. And it was interesting every year at the anniversary of the accident, there'll be LinkedIn comments, and one of the guys who was a previous superintendent for Horizon, his name was Bill, and the same last names. His name was Bill, and he wrote on LinkedIn that the guys in the rig deserved better, and he did. Everyone involved with the operation should have done better, and they did.
So obviously after Horizon, the investigations and that start, how was your experience in that?
The investigations could be like a whole different, it could be a book, which I would never write because I don't want to. There were so many that it was interesting. They were all very different. The first one was the MBI hearing, which is where you can see me on C-SPAN. this was a very bizarre event. Of it was almost like, it's hard to explain. My lawyer, because BP appointed me lawyers and paid for them, and these guys were great. I love them. The Marine Board Investigation was run by a joint group of the Coast Guard, the Deepwater Horizon, like all Deepwater rigs, they're a boat, they're floating around there. So for the Coast Guard, they're what's called a class vessel. So they are heavily involved with its operation. And then the MMS, which is not called the MMS anymore, but I'm going to call it that for this podcast because that's the era I worked in. They were the people that you would tell them what you're going to do, and they gave you approval. There was a set of rules and everything. They had a joint investigation, and that's what you saw. This, and that's what you would see on the C-SPAN feed. And then I went into this investigation, and they spent 10 hours of berating me, basically. But it didn't mean anything because I don't even know what the results of the MBI investigation was. I don't remember reading anything. So that investigation was very, very weird, where people would continuously come up and ask me the same question over and over again, but it was Halliburton, Transocean, and then all the different people. There's an important point here, and this goes back to what your podcast, I believe, was about. This is the people working on your rig, right? Well, so we're BP's the operator. We have Transocean, Halliburton, MI, guy that Leo worked for. We work together every day, 24 hours a day, 24/7. And all of a sudden, you have each other's back. Is life perfect on an offshore drilling rig? No, it's not. No. We had each other's back all the time. And now all of a sudden, you have this catastrophe, this accident happen, and now everyone's against each other. But it wasn't because the hands were against each other, because they weren't. It was the way the legal people made it, and I was actually surprised, a little bit surprised, maybe naive, about how bad it was, how abusive it was about the Transocean people that interrogated me and the Halliburton people that interrogated me in the state of Louisiana, the state of we all work together, So why are we against each other now? I didn't understand that. If you work on rig, and especially if you live there, it's not like that. Do you like everybody on the rig? No. There's always an asshole, at least one. I don't know why that is, but on Horizon, there's 200 people on this rig. It's a lot of people. So, I was actually a little bit taken back by the fact that all of a sudden now we're against each other, because I sure as hell never felt that way. We were drilling a well. I thought we were all together. Yeah. The investigations weren't made that way. They was made to make us against each other. It was the United States legal system is messed up when it comes to something like this. They weren't prepared for something like this. And to this day, I still just shake my head, because, these are people you work with every day, day in and day out, and all of a sudden they're your enemy. They weren't your enemy. So it was a terrible experience.
One of the things you said to me actually, in the lead up to coming on it, was what was published and what actually happened didn't line up. Why do you think they turned everything around in that way?
Okay, so let's put this in perspective. You have the deepwater, you have the offshore industry, and I don't know how many people work in the offshore industry. that was involved with fossil fuel, hydrocarbon. Not, I know you do stuff about wind and solar or whatever, all that stuff. But stay with fossil fuel. Maybe in the whole world, 300,000 people, maybe, I don't know. But I do know that when the accident happened, there were 150 rigs out there floating around drilling deep water wells. That's 150 rigs, right? So the guy in charge of the rig is the OIM. That means that day there were 150 people, 150 OIMs working that day. Company men. There were, if it was set up like the Horizon, there were 300 company men working that day in the world. Senior tool pusher, very important position. There were 150 of them working that day. Drillers.
Right.
I'm sorry, tool pushers. I'm going on and on. Very small amount of people. The rig has 200 people on it, right? All right. That's 30,000 people working in all right.
Deepwater.
Then the accident.
Yeah.
Then the accident happens. And it's on the cover of every TV station in the United States. I don't know what it was like in the UK.
It was
have no idea. Every newspaper. And then all of a sudden, even though this industry is such a small group of people that really know what's going on, you have a 60 Minutes article from CBS. You have a CNN special that has some dude on it that never even saw a deepwater rig as long as ever in his life. He wouldn't know a deepwater rig from an apple or banana. All right? They come on and do an hour special. Now, everybody is a deepwater drilling expert. Well, I never met a deepwater drilling expert in my life. I still have. So, and they come out with all these things. They had a guy from the University of California come out and say, well, the only reason this happened is because BP is a bunch of evil people and it was bound to happen. They don't know anything about what we were doing. That guy didn't build me. I mean, what the hell is this? This is crazy. Everyone's a deepwater drilling expert, but there's not. There's people who might think they are, but they know they're not. But the media convicted BP before anything was found out. And that's a fact. You can look at the history. It is a fact. And it is not something that, I'm making up. You can go through the timeline. The MBI hearing I went to, which was the Marine Board investigation, happened in July. Okay. Prior to that, they had already had our CEO before Congress and stuff like that. And they were talking about, well, it happened because you didn't do this, and this. Well, we still hadn't even re-entered the well and found out what happened. And so BP was tried and convicted before the trial ever happened. That's my opinion. That's not BP's opinion. That's John Gatt's opinion.
Do you think BP and Transocean were treated fairly at all during the investigation?
I don't think anyone was treated fairly. No, it wasn't their intent. Their intent was not fairness. So, as a person in my position, and hopefully there are people who understand this, we actually went to incident investigation training where you investigate incidents that happen because there's, unfortunately, things happen. And you have an accident, which is what this was. It was a complex industrial accident. You have an accident. All right? So now you have an investigation. All right. What happened? Figure out why it happened. What can we do to not make it happen again? None of that was what you saw. All these investigations were basically centered around, so the government investigations were centered around a narrative to put all the blame on BP. It's pretty blatant. I mean, It's just the truth. I mean, and once again, I'm not saying this is BP's opinion.
No,
John.
it's John's. Yeah.
This is John's opinion. Yeah.
Because obviously the media, I'll not go too much detail on my thoughts on mainstream media, especially nowadays. And back then it was obviously, I don't think it was quite as bad, but they crucified you.
Oh, yeah.
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 Absolutely
They
crucified
said
you.
all these things. Yeah. They said things, but once again, these people became deep water drilling experts in an hour. So that's why I made the little narrative here at the beginning. There's like 30,000 people in the world that was doing this. There's 7 billion people in the world. At the same time that accident happened, there were over what is a very let me think of highly regarded position in the world, a doctor. There were over 1 million doctors working in the United States when that accident happened. There were 150 OIMs working when that accident happened in the world. Now let's get real here. These people had no idea what we're doing, and they still don't know what goes on. It's not just a complex operation. You're also out there living with people for either 3 or 4 or 5 weeks at a time, and that's when you bring Leo in. It's very, very important. It is a different perspective for the people that are there and the people in the office and how and their perceptions. But it's been that way since I started, and I'm sure it was like that before I did too. And I have no idea what it's like because I've not. My last deep water job was in Angola, and that ended in the end of 2011. Maybe it's different now, but I doubt it. I'm sure it's the same.
How much does politics have a part to play in the way that everything went?
Well, the politics was 100% of what happened, of how it all went. It was, I did investigations with Chemical Safety Board, and it was sort of a little bit out of their league. And they were very nice people. And then this is outside of the MBI hearing. Of course, I did a deposition for the civil trial, which we can talk about later. That was 17 hours of deposition for the civil trial. It's 900 pages long. And then we had the most interesting group of people was the Presidential Commission. They decided to form this group of people, and they hired a lawyer out of Illinois, Chicago, to lead it. And they were the only people, I believe, that actually tried to understand what we were saying. These guys were smart. I didn't get to meet a lot of smart people, not in the oil and gas business, but in the legal business. You could tell these guys were at a different level than the other folks. These guys were smart. And they asked really great questions. In their final report, you can see me in it. It's the Presidential Commission. I think I mentioned the most. But at the end of the day, it was redacted. It was edited. All these investigations, I'm going to say this one more time, and people are going to hate it. They watch your podcast. This is my opinion, not VP's. Okay, but what we said and what was put in there is not exactly the same thing. It was redacted. It was changed to put the blame on BP. So as far as I'm concerned, all those investigations were basically useless. But I didn't see anything come out of it that said, this is what we need to do to make it safer.
Did you have any pressure on you from upper management at all?
No. No. I had no pressure from management when I was drilling the well, and I had no pressure from management during the trials and all the investigations. No. Zero. None. And like I said, even drilling the well, people said that we were woefully, what was the one woefully behind schedule and over budget. That's a bunch of BS. We weren't. We had a well to go to, but once again, just saying to the people that actually work offshore, you work on a well, it takes as long as it's going to take. And that's just the way it is. And I can't change that. Neither can they. It just takes as long as it takes. And if BP put themselves in a position where they were going to get fined or something like that because we didn't get there in time, it's really not my problem. I mean, because I don't have any control of that. And it goes to Leo, what Leo said, and that's the reason I reached out. Leo's perspective there was that, we had to go to this well called Mile. We did. He mentioned that it was a well that we had to go complete, which we didn't. That's right. Let's clean it up. Let's clean it up a little bit. We were going to plug the well. So it was on the P&A list, and it got to the point where the NMS said, you got to go plug this well. And so we inserted that into the well that we were going to go drill next, which was called Casquita. And that's why Blair was out there, because they had the people who were going to, the asset we were going to P&A this well for, which is plug and abandon, wanted certain things done. And so he was out there looking at how to hook certain pieces of equipment up because that's what these people wanted done. Because the rig was actually built to drill wells. It was not outfitted to complete wells. You really couldn't complete a well. Well, I guess you could, but it would take a lot of boats and rig and roll to do. And so he was not right about that. It wasn't we were going to complete the well. We're going to plug the well. And then we can get a whole bond log story, which is a whole story in itself that you can have tons of offshoot things in, because it's probably one of the more interesting things. Once again, the people that watch it understand what that means.
So obviously, we'll go back to the media bit a bit just before we get into the trial. But do you believe that from the outset they were out to make you guys the villains from the get-go, yourselves and Transocean?